Hello. This is a video primarily to Day, maybe Trig. Now, also to everybody, thanks for the reply on account of odd. So I'm going to make a short, just couple minute video, and then there's a second part, which will be in this video. So the whole video will be longer, but on a priori truth. Okay, now first of all, we have to remember there's a very sharp distinction between some eternal truth that may be out there in the world, if that's what's out there, or in the matrix memory bank, or it might be, who knows, an eternal truth, however that could happen. That's different from an a priori truth we have. That's us knowing that thing and having that thing in our brains, right? I'm not disparaging it. I'm trying to put it as fair as possible. So this isn't about, at this level, well, anyway, never mind. All right, so let's say we have this experience, this film strip, and in there, I mean, I think Day, you acknowledge we have this experience, and in there you get enough information to figure out this candidate for an a priori truth, right? And it's going to be something that's always true in your experience in this whole film strip, anywhere you could or have tested it, because it's an a priori, it's an eternal truism. Okay, so it's saying something about the film strip. And the thing is, the film strip is generated by something, X. The film strip is generated by something, right? By a projector, in the cave of Buddha. No, by a mechanical world, what we'd call it. But we have more than one candidate for what that mechanical world's like, right? We have the Newtonian one, we have quantum mechanics, it's general relativity. These contradict in certain ways, right? But they all have validity as well. Okay, so that's just, so we'll just call those candidates the mechanical world. Could be a matrix, could be that we're in the dream of a god. We'll use those three because they epitomize a nice broad spectrum of kinds of ideas about what's generating this. What's the projector? Where's it coming from? But we could not distinguish if it was being generated by any of those three things unless there was a way to distinguish, like the matrix had glitches. But what about if there is a matrix that before it ever has a glitch, or doesn't glitch, or it's the dream of a god and that doesn't glitch? This makes, logically, this makes your a priori truth, its true meaning, contingent on which of these it might be. Now, since I believe you believe, like I do, in a mechanical universe, we'll just leave that one, what the a priori truth means in there. But but I'll come back to it. In the matrix, that a priori truth is about how the computer works that you're running on, specifically even the software, the logical rules that make up the program generating the matrix. The a priori truth would be about how that program always works. And if we're in the dream of a god, then it's how that god's subconscious or dream logic works. It could be, in this case, it could be changed by a programmer. In this case, if the dream changes, Dream logic is notoriously inconsistent. Of course, this is a God's dream, so that's probably why it's so incredibly consistent, but it doesn't mean it couldn't change. Obviously, that'd be a reason. The mechanical universe, it's something about the physics or the logic, the arrangement, whatever the patterns are a part of. Now, I see the patterns are in images, repeating images in here. That's what makes something a pattern or not. In a sense, primarily patterns are over time, but human neocortex is able to freeze an image and take time looking at it to find the patterns. So in the mechanical case, you still could have this situation where whatever makes this a truism in our film strip, that's changed. So what an a priori truth is, what it really means, is contingent on something that we can't know. Therefore, there is no such thing as an idea a human has, which is necessarily in the film strip. Your idea right now is just your impression of having an idea. If you don't believe in willpower and that's all an illusion, even more so, it's just a frame where you're going, I'm thinking about this truth, this deep truth. In other words, cause and effect. If that is an a priori truth, the way cause and effect works, then you're just saying that how cause and effect works in a computer, in a subconscious, in a mechanical world, in a different kind of mechanical world. An a priori truth can't be contingent on all of those things. That's the whole point. It's not supposed to be contingent. It's supposed to be eternal and consistent. And this makes sense to me because our idea of cause and effects has changed and changed and changed and will change more. Okay, so now I've been talking about this kind of thing, this is part 2, for a long time. This is a video 8 years ago, and really why I started having a YouTube channel was to talk about this epistemology and the relativistic skeptic stuff, and I have. And a lot of the basics I presented a long time ago, and I don't really go over and over and over. But I was thinking I should in cases like this. I think this diagram is a good way of describing what we're talking about. The film strip, so this is about the first versus third person view of self, right? Now, let's zoom in. The link is if you want to watch the actual video. So at the bottom, I say perceptions just happen to us, right? Perceptions happen to us. That's the film strip. The film strip is a depiction, a metaphor of the perceptions happen to us, right? And that's our actual base experience. And sometimes when we're a baby, you can imagine just colors and sounds. We don't know what it all means. But we still have a lot of that not knowing what it means, but there's a lot we think we know what it means. Okay, so our brain is able to, or unable not to, process this information. As it flows through, the neural net in the brain is basically stimulated to grow in one network versus another, just like water going down a hill. Whatever the shape of the hill, the water will figure it out, and given enough time, you'll have a little system of tributaries and seasonal streams. Okay, and so the same thing happens here. And so this whole idea is really more about where we start and how it radiates out. It's not a solipsistic, I'm not a solipsist, and this epistemology is not limited to solipsism, but it does limit itself to solipsistically indeniable truths, things that as a solipsist you still have to accept. It starts there. It uses that as the foundation, because this is my amazing discovery that human experience is based in human experience. Okay, and that means it starts in a subjective experience, and people don't want to do that. They want to do it the other way. See what I mean? So perceptions happen to us. We're babies. Boom, they're happening to us. Okay, you don't necessarily have any idea of I or anything just because perceptions are happening to you. But as you see the pattern and these feelings of decision making, these feelings of choice, um, that pattern can all be tied together under this concept of I, but that's not actually going to happen yet. The next thing you get from analyzing the film strip is that a subjective and solipsistic model of how perceptions behave, right? A theory of perceptual patterns. Like you think the whole world is just a cartoon, right? Your mom's just a cartoon and you're looking, but you have a theory about how it behaves. If you cry, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and gives you something that tastes sweet, and that's one of your favorite film frames that you can have. Sweet, right? Now, after a while, you can base on that theory of basically color and motion, you can base a model of a material model, right? And the material model is, at this point, still primarily material facts. What actually matters to you? Did you get a sweet or a bitter experience from this model, right? So it's the beginning of that things are real, other than there's real truths that you have to figure out. That's the material implication, logical implication. And here's where it's related to the idea of a material world made of stuff, right? Right above it, a materialistic model of perception. Okay, so you at this point are realizing that you're not just, this is, the world isn't just these perceptions you're having. No, you're inside a world and you have a materialistic model of, I'm perceiving the apple because there's an apple there, right? And at that point, then you're prepared to have a view of the self as a third person walking around in the world, right? And this arrow is in the direction of decreasing relative certainty. We are really sure perceptions have to us. We're less sure of our view of the third person selfhood. But because we just love everything we've come up with this 3D model that we're Sims walking around in the 3D world, that we want to base it in that. We explain our perceptions, as do I, from having eyes and from being immersed in the world. We explain our perceptions from being immersed, and so did the ancient Greeks. We're in the world, we're sunk in here, we're immersed in it, and that's generating, that's we're seeing, right? And I also agree that that's happening. But there's the classical romance with this idea that it's like, well, let's reverse things. Since let's pretend that's at the bottom, right? We're starting with all these things and boom, 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 and you go the layers in the other direction down to why perceptions happen to us, which is entirely backwards. And I'd say the backwardness of that, trying to start from the third person perspective, we're doing information processing on our multi-band, our 16 track film strip that each of us gets. And you and I I can't see your film strip, but we can simulate that by you talk to me, you give me an impression on my film strip that I can use to generate images that you describe. And if I'm really good at recreating images from descriptions and you're really good at descriptions, I might get a pretty good thing, like a crime sketch artist can do. You tell me what you saw, I'll draw it. And then it's like, wow, that's really what it looks like. And that's our communication. It's still in my film strip. So if you go backwards, then you get weird logical problems, is all, right? If you go from perceptions happen to us, look, we're not missing any axioms. It's just honesty. We are actually having this experience, and I'm going to talk about I and we and all that later. I believe in will, so I'm going to use those words. But this film strip analogy, the perceptions happen to us, doesn't require I. It's put perceptions happen to us particularly because we don't know I think, and I can't say I perceive. That makes me the actor on the object of the predicate. It makes me, it's a theory. I could just be a pattern in the film strip that has experiences of recognizing patterns of itself in the film strip. I mean, fine. We're starting from an experience that we all have, except for you're right. We're not starting from it. Truly, I am starting from my own film strip in which I witness you. I witness all of these images that show a relationship. You have DNA, I have DNA. We're basically the same kind of machine. Obviously, it's sensible to think the internal phenomena. I haven't seen your heart either, and I think you probably have a heart. It's probably pumping your blood, right? So it's reasonable to think you also have your own film strip. And frankly, since we're a communal animal, yeah, actually, we started out thinking that everybody had agency, right? If some kid had some mentality at some age of not thinking other creatures have agency, which I'm not sure is possible with the human brain, maybe if there's some sort of a malfunction, or maybe at a certain age, you have to give agency. Yeah, if you were sociopathic and had trouble picturing agency of other people, your big brother and sister are going to make you recognize their agency at some point, right? So we do actually start off with that, but I'm not putting it at the foundation of my uh, epistemology. The epistemology is layered in this way, not because everybody has their ideas carefully layered from least certain to more certain, or from more certain to least certain. Um, a layered model of how we climb higher and higher. And everybody wants to talk about theories that go down to this third person level of self, and there's these four other layers. And of course, you could make more fine grained layers than this. But really, what's always happening is if you're smart, then you're good at analyzing your own perceptions. Some people are really good at analyzing their own perceptions, but they're not good at going out and getting perceptions, right? And that's a big problem. All right. This is the unification of philosophy as psychology from the inside of the human brain, right? Psychology is of the person as a third person, but inherently philosophy is about the first person. And subjectivity comes first, and objectivity has to be explained in terms of subjectivity. Why? Because subjectivity is the more certain of the two. You can't take the less certain of the two, talk about begging the question, and try to use it to justify the more certain view. That's backwards. And it's a way to pretend to get to be more certain about your ideas of third person self when they're all theoretical. Yeah, I share those theories with you. But this is why we have to be open-minded to things, whether they're common sense or not. All our common sense can possibly have evolved to handle is that the part where the perceptions happen to us. If reality breaks our sense of common sense, then our sense of common sense needs to evolve. Right. That's my opinion anyway. So, yeah, so this video is 8 years old here. It's various on this kind of subject. You also have this one where No.
All right, I'm going to talk about objectivism.
If I had time, I'd make these PowerPoint. Um, okay, these ones.
I want to make a couple more videos. Powers. We could learn
This
how to
one
break.
where I drew the diagram this way with the material going into the mind like that. This is something that acknowledges our high-level theories of the material world, right? So I draw it that, look, the material exists out there. Sure, I'm with you. I believe it. I don't think we're in the matrix or a God's brain. I think there are some arguments against that. I think there's arguments that those are somewhat contrived. However, they're still good placeholders because if you limit yourself to just the so-called materialistic or mechanical theories, there's a potential infinite number of those as well that are just as different between the matrix and a God's brain. What do those things really mean? We don't have enough definite definition of all those terms. So still, because of the film strip idea, you've got to talk about how it gets into the mind. This is also a video I'd like to go over. All right, cheers.